Double male lead+paranoid redemption+easy and funny+supernatural but not terrifying. Qiehei was born in a coffin and had no parents. The master who saved his life called him Fuxing, but said he didn't have many years to live. The cannibalistic ghost cursed him as a lonely and wild ghost dressed in human skin, occupying a magpie's nest, and he couldn't bear to die. And the immortal he invited back with a kiss is a romantic brain, with all his heart set on sacrificing his love. In response to this, the 5-star ghost expert, both timid and brave, and the Ghost Enthusiast Sun Eye, Qiehei, said, "I am XX. If you walk too much at night, even ghosts will find it annoying." Having a strong desire for survival, Bai Qiehei, who talks to people and ghosts, is attacked by a 1,000-year-old demon with X's paranoid and passionate love brain. Chapter 1. Welcome homeowners. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. He seems to have been emptied of his soul while working the night shift, leaving only a shell trapped in the security room. Haha, Qiehei yawned heavily and was extremely tired. Just as his gaze became somewhat blurred due to drowsiness, a gray-white shadow quickly rushed past Qiehei's eyes. Qiehei suddenly felt completely sleepy and leaned his head out of the window. Looking at the swaying shadow, Qiehei and his brain suddenly started running at high speed and said, "Hey. Are you from this community? I see you're not familiar with me." Qiehei has been working as a security guard in this elderly community for half a month. Apart from the owner, he hardly sees anyone new, even the vendors in this area are acquaintances. But for such a face, he couldn't find any matching homeowner in his memory. After all, it has been almost a month since welcoming homeowners home, and people can basically recognize it. And the back figure seemed to be unheard of, still swaying and walking inside. "Hey." Qiehei put on his hat, fastened his rubber stick, and grabbed his flashlight. As he was about to close the door, he looked at the luxury version of the explosion-proof steel fork, thought for a moment, and then picked it up again. "What are you doing? No one lives in that building, it's almost moved. You're sneaking around, what are you doing here?" Qiehei chased after the person, but he didn't expect their body to twist and turn, and their speed was quite fast. The flashlight's light illuminated the figure with several bloodstains on his back, and Qiehei was so scared that he raised his steel fork in his hand. Just as he was about to warn the unwelcome guest not to move forward, the person suddenly turned a corner. Qiehei was startled and quickly turned his flashlight to follow, but the person's hunched back disappeared from the pale halo reflected by the flashlight. In the quiet of the night, even the gentle breeze emitted a chilling aura, making Qiehei shudder. The cold wind was like a cold hand, gently brushing against his temples, itchy and scared, causing him to swallow his saliva deeply. It was too creepy, and Qiehei felt that even if he held a steel fork and a rubber stick, it was not safe to rush forward recklessly. He decided to call for reinforcements first before going to catch someone. After calling the security captain, Qiehei, who was highly focused, stiffened and there was someone behind him. Although there was no sound of footsteps, Qiehei could clearly feel a cold gaze, as if it was sticking to his neck, cold and slippery. He suddenly turned around, but there was no one behind him. Qiehei looked back several times, not to mention that there was no one behind him, even the surroundings were as quiet as death. Suddenly, a cold and gloomy wind swept by, and a strange sound came from around, as if stepping on a withered leaf. The fragile leaves shatter under gravity, making a scalp-tingling friction sound. But in Qiehei's sight, this place was cleaned up completely, without even a single leaf, and there was nothing that could make that kind of noise. Qiehei pretended to be calm, holding a steel fork, turned around and walked towards the security room, his pace getting faster and faster. Seemingly to confirm Qiehei's bad premonition, a heavy voice came from behind. Qiehei took a deep breath and just as he was about to spread his long legs, he began to run recklessly when a lukewarm hand rested on his shoulder. Ah 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 ah. Although Qiehei was dominated by immense fear in his heart, the weeks of pre-employment training were clearly effective. He shouted, turned around, and poked back, pointing something behind him that was unknown to be human. Oh, oh, oh. Big brother, my stomach. The person let out a pig-like howl. Is this thing a person? Qi and Sun thought that this movement was indeed emitted by a person, so they aimed the bright flashlight at him. What do you do? He looked at the man's blue face and judged that he was a living person. The person howled bitterly and shook the exquisite packaging in his hand, saying, "What can I do? Deliver takeout." Damn it, this rundown community has been surrounded and the road is not easy to walk, making me almost exceed the time limit. I was hoping to get less scolding soon, but I fell to the ground and died in pain. He used a flashlight to shine on him all over his body, then couldn't bear it and stuttered, saying, "Are you sure? Are you really okay with the amount of bleeding?" "Just looking scary, it's okay, I've fallen several times with experience." "It doesn't seem like it's okay, why don't we go to the hospital first?" "No need to go to the hospital for free. You really don't need to, let go of me quickly, don't exceed the time limit. I really deliver takeout. I was supposed to ask you where Unit 2, Building 10, Courtyard 2 is, but you almost scared me to death with a loud cry. Why did you even cross me on a tree?" The delivery guy was so anxious that he kicked his legs and twisted his waist to escape from the confinement of the steel fork. He finally breathed a sigh of relief and put down his steel fork. "Who made you just enter the door and jump like a flying monkey, without even seeing a shadow? You can't hear me calling you from behind." The delivery guy looked at the steel fork and breathed a sigh of relief. "I'm wearing headphones, maybe I didn't hear you. Please tell me where Unit 2 of Building 10 is in Courtyard 2. "Well, this is Courtyard 2. Turn left at the entrance and you'll find Building 10. Once you enter, keep walking until you reach Unit 2. He glanced sideways and found that he was really wearing Bluetooth earphones, so he told him the specific location. The delivery guy glanced at his phone and said, "Thank goodness there's still time, thank you." As soon as he finished speaking, the delivery guy twisted his teeth in pain and rushed out. He put down his flashlight and shook his head helplessly. In these days, money is hard to earn and feces are hard to eat. "Xiao Qi. Xiao Qi." The captain's anxious voice came from the pager, and he pressed the call button. "It's okay, Captain. He's delivering takeout and fell, making it inconvenient to walk. I even said who was sneaking around." "That's fine, you can go back tonight and leave early." "Is it really fake? Did the surprise come so suddenly?" He said politely, his feet moving non-stop. When the captain's voice came again, everyone went to the security room and put down their forks. "I think you're a good person. Since you're going to become a regular next month, let me be honest with you." The captain's voice sounded muffled. He didn't care and happily took off his uniform. "Captain, you said, my ears are all washed, listen. Don't be poor, kid. If you still want to work after listening, just keep working and sign a confidentiality agreement, doubling your salary directly. Of course, if you're afraid or don't want to work anymore, you don't have to come tomorrow." The captain's voice was very nervous, and he first revealed the benefits, indicating that he was quite satisfied with Qi and this young man. "Money is hard to earn these days, and feces are hard to eat. Why don't I do such a good job?" "I will definitely do it, Captain. Then you have to listen carefully. Do you know why we still keep this dilapidated community in such a bustling place? I'll tell you, it's because the feng shui here is good. But the good thing is that this place doesn't support people, it gathers in energy. Sigh, but don't be afraid, it has nothing to do with us, and we don't live inside either. Well, when our community was just built decades ago, there was a wealthy person interested in it. Don't inquire who this wealthy person is. They bought the entire 10th building of the second courtyard, leaving only the innermost second unit as a haunted house. It's a bit lacking in virtue, but there hasn't been anything in these years, and not many people know about it over time. I just saw that you're a good person and treat you like your own. Why aren't you talking? You're scared. It just sounds scary, but there's nothing wrong. Look at me, I've been working hard for over a decade now. It's all about high risk and high return. As long as we don't go in here, keep your mouth shut, and the reward will be 2 piles. You're lucky, kid. I'm about to be transferred. I thought of you the first time this happened. Don't miss it, why didn't you keep quiet? Don't be so scared that you wet your pants, The sound in the walkie-talkie suddenly stopped with a smile, as if something was wrong. Hello, Qiehei. Are you there? Hello. The captain, who was roaring at the walkie-talkie, felt a chill on his neck and back. He didn't know that the security room was empty at this moment. A young man wearing a white shirt flashed through the surveillance footage, followed by a thick black mist that gradually enveloped the surveillance view. Easy. The surveillance screen twisted a few times and snowflakes appeared. Chapter 2. Sacrifices. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. It's ridiculous, where can I register? Xian urged with a playful expression on his face. System. The registration of the new host ID Xian has been successful, and the real name authentication has been passed. As time passed, many new faces appeared out of thin air in front of the empty mansion, including men, women, old, and young. Bang! Distorted blue and silver light and electricity flashed across the horizon, and dark clouds surged from the west of the sky. Xian trembled with fear and said, "You scared me to death. You thought you were going to chop me. Walla-la-la-la. Suddenly, a sudden rain has arrived. Be careful, these books are all brought back by the young master from abroad. Be careful when moving them. Be careful of your skin." The butler's voice was sharp and annoyed. Yes. The servants responded with great fear. Xian actually wants to say that these books are all in a suitcase, which is waterproof and not damaged by rain. But as soon as he saw the butler's harsh expression and the servant's numb expression, he stopped talking and remained silent, unwilling to listen anymore. He looked up at the plaque on the house. Qi Mansion. The powerful characters on it were written by the imperial relatives and relatives of the old era, and they are very beautiful. But what caught Xian's attention the most were the 2 red lanterns, with the candles flickering in the wind and rain, unable to extinguish. In my impression, it seems that my original uncle has just taken a concubine. Xian looked around and saw nothing unusual. What about the target character? Since he's blacked out, he must be a beautiful and powerful person, right? System, dear, the target character here has not yet appeared. When the target appears, the task will be automatically activated, and a character introduction and blackened value will pop up. He asked again, how long do I have to stay in this world before I can leave? Well, is there a time limit? The system says, dear, your health is limited by time. Once the task is completed, there will be a countdown prompt. If you want to stay in this world for more time, you need to redeem the points for a certain amount of time. Xian looked at the gloomy environment and shuddered. These target characters sound quite dangerous. I won't suddenly stumble during the mission, will I? System. I don't rule out this possibility, but the system will protect the host to the maximum extent possible. We also ask the host to actively progress in order to obtain points and exchange items, in case of unexpected needs. Xian let out a long sigh and said, it turned out to be an open-world survival game disguised as a box court strategy game. System. Kiss, you quite understand. Master Biao, please walk slowly. The servant saw that Xian was taking big steps and the umbrella couldn't cover him, afraid that the rain would rain on him. Xian didn't pay much attention, but the remaining light brushed over the shoulder of the servant and slowed down his pace. In his memory, this young master, who had been living abroad all along, left home when he was young and was not close to his mother's family. After taking the ferry, the Qi family sent the most popular old car to pick up the young Master Biao who had returned from studying abroad. Even the old butler who followed Mr. Qi and read countless people had to admit that this young master had a dignified appearance, dressed in a black suit that set off a person's spirit. Young Master Biao has been living abroad for a long time, without those Western styles. He exudes a faint scholarly aura as a scholar. Undoubtedly, he is the son of the young lady and the cousin of the Qi family. Xian. A merchant gentleman dressed in splendid attire and exuding a noble demeanor appeared amidst a crowd of warblers and swallows, affectionately but with dignity, calling out Song Yin's nickname. Seeing his wealthy and chubby uncle, the contemporary leader of the century-old Qi family, Song Yin was stunned for a moment. It is obvious that my uncle is no longer the tall and upright person in my original impression, he is old. Chapter 3. Rebirth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qi Shihuan felt that he was getting old and couldn't hear these words. He burst into tears for a moment and said, "My poor Yuan, I miss home and can't come back to see her. She's not in good health, and I shouldn't have let her marry far away." Uncle. Song Yin's hypocritical consolation was interrupted by soft and coquettish voices before he could speak. "Master, be careful of your health." "That's right, Master, take care of your health. My aunt definitely doesn't want you to be so upset. Master, don't be too sad. Well, Master Biao has come back to see you. If you hurt your body, Master Biao will have a hard time in his heart." With a warm fragrance of soft jade in his arms, Qi Shihuan sniffed the powder around him and quickly regained consciousness from his grief. "Uncle, don't be sad anymore, otherwise my nephew will really be guilty," Song Yin insincerely comforted. Qi Shihuan took the handkerchief handed over by his aunt, who didn't know which room it was, and wiped the water stains from the corners of his eyes. "I'm getting older, I've made Xiaoyin laugh," he said. "Uncle has a true temperament, it's too late for my nephew to admire him." Song Yin casually scanned several aunts and wives, who were well maintained. Song Yin couldn't even recognize which one was the youngest. Unable to find the target person, Song Yin quickly withdrew his gaze and no one noticed his scrutinizing gaze. "Look, this is someone who can talk, unlike the second person who can't spit out ivory from a dog's mouth." After Song Yin boasted about Qi Shihuan recklessly and presented a customized pocket watch brought back from abroad as a gift, Qi Shihuan finally stopped his deep-seated longing. When entering the hall, a table of banquets had just been prepared, indicating that the servants in the mansion were capable. Everyone took their seats one by one, but Qi Shihuan did not move his chopsticks. Everyone stared outside the door, as if waiting for someone. Soon, Song Yin's idea was confirmed, and a beautiful and graceful young woman supported a dignified old woman as she entered. Song Yin immediately recognized the old woman as the eldest lady of the Qi family. Although the eldest lady is 5 or 6 years older than her uncle, her original aunt used to be a true relative of the imperial family, with a serious and dignified title. Unfortunately, the situation was turbulent, and Gugu married as a merchant wife. Due to his shallow marital relationship, he watched helplessly as he took in one concubine after another. Song Yin watched as his aunt sat down, and then helplessly watched as his uncle took the hand of a nearby beauty and placed her in the position to his left. Song Yin remembered the red lantern outside the Zhumen gate, and it turned out that this woman was Aunt Ba. "Seeing that my uncle's eyes are almost growing on her, Aunt Ba will still be pampered for a long time." Song Yin thought of getting up and bowing in time, "Hello to my aunt." The old lady was speechless by the old man beside her, waving her handkerchief and letting Song Yin sit down. Seeing everyone gathered, Qi Shihuan waved his hand and began to eat, but the other one did not come down from the beauty's lap. Seeing such a sumptuous dish, Song Yin's eyes lit up with green light, and he ate silently with his head down, without deliberately paying attention to the undercurrent surging on the table. After a while, Song Yin suddenly felt something was wrong. "This person is almost all here, why hasn't the target character appeared yet? He glanced calmly and happened to see his uncle, who was over 50 years old, with his greasy mouth wide open, insisting on taking the dishes from Aunt Bai's chopsticks and drooling on them. He felt a bit nauseous and quickly shifted his gaze. The expressions of several wealthy aunties were also like eating a fly. Chapter 4 is not a nightmare. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Song Yin quickly lowered his head, his expression somewhat indescribable, thinking to himself that he was getting old. Only the young man beside him slammed his chopsticks fiercely, but it didn't attract much attention, and the people on the table seemed to have become accustomed to it. Song Yin couldn't ignore it. Although the man around him didn't have much expression, he couldn't hide his gaze as he wanted to strangle someone. As expected, the young man spoke and said, "Dad, you haven't collapsed yet. Damn it, you curse me." Qi Xian didn't think there was anything wrong with eating a few bites of the dishes on his concubine's chopsticks at an old age. "I'll tell you the second one. No matter how powerful you are in the army, I'm your father at home. You better have a son-like appearance." Qi Xian's beard was twisted with anger. If it weren't for the young and beautiful Aunt Bai following his back and coaxing him softly, he would probably have lifted a table of vegetables. Qi Liang pretended not to hear and sneered coldly. The old lady's face was also pale with iron. At this moment, she was supposed to say a few words to ease the awkward situation, but she waved her handkerchief and called for someone to help her leave. Song Yin felt like an outsider, and it was really awkward to encounter such a scene. At this moment, the third aunt beside her was too talkative. "Second, why don't you apologize to your father quickly? It's really outrageous of you to say that." Qi Liang glanced at his mother with an ambiguous smile on his face and said, "My father taught me that my son shouldn't bring official authority into the house." Qi Xian frowned and snorted coldly, "This is the good son you've taught. Is there no one left in the military camp? I think he needs to go through more training." Aunt San apologized and said, "What the master said is, I will definitely talk about him later." Humph. Qi Xian waved his sleeve and grabbed Aunt Bai's delicate jade hand before getting up and leaving. The table of people looked at each other, and no one expected that the usually muddled second young master would make a fool of himself at such a time. But the second young master is full of abilities and means, and he emerged from the military camp at a young age, winning the favor of the general and having a promising future. The Qi family had finished early, and he had the final say. No one dared to criticize him. Qi Xian left, and there was no need for the remaining aunts, wives, and young ladies to stay any longer. They all took excuses to leave, leaving only Song Yin and Qi Liang for a while. Song Yin felt like sitting on pins and needles, and was about to find a way out when the second young master next to him suddenly picked up a silver chopstick and gave him a fresh and tender piece of pigeon meat. "Cousin, would this dish taste good or not? I can't eat my family's food abroad." "Even if it does, it's not authentic," Qi Liang said with a harmless expression on his face. The second young master made a living in the military camp and held a significant official position. Upon reflection, Song Yin had to pick up his chopsticks again. "Do you have any plans for my cousin to return to China this time?" Qi Liang asked like an ordinary brother, exchanging greetings. Song Yin, who had already been kicked out of the house, swallowed the fresh and tender meat and spoke a lie without making a draft. "My mother asked me to come back and take a look. I'll go back in a while," she said. "I heard that my cousin's studies are over and he doesn't have any plans to come back and settle down." "Well, I've thought about it. But let's take a look at it now." Upon hearing this ambiguous answer, Qi Liang smiled clearly and said, "The big picture ahead should be carefully considered." Song Yin also responded with a smile. Song Yin looked at Qi Liang, who was in a good mood, pondered for a while before asking, "Why haven't you seen Big Brother this time you're back?" Chapter 5. Long Premeditated. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Just now, Song Yin counted several characters in his memory that were subjectively more likely to be blackened, but unfortunately, there was a person who never appeared from his entry into the mansion to the family banquet. That person is the young master of the Qi family. Qi Liang suddenly burst out laughing, his wine glass in his hand not even holding steady, and his cuffs were splashed wet. What's up? Song Yin looked at Qi Liang's expression, feeling a bit strange. Qi Liang shook his head, looked up, and drank the fine wine from the cup in one gulp. Big brother, he has been dead for some time now. As soon as the words fell, a thunderbolt flashed outside the house. With a loud bang, it was deafening. Ha! Song Yin's expression was no less than being struck by lightning. Song Yin stuttered and said, why is it so sudden? I have never heard my mother mention it before. Qi Liang looked indifferent and said, perhaps the eldest lady hasn't arranged for someone to pass on the news yet, has she? He poured himself another glass of wine and took a light sip. You know, the old lady never likes to handle these miscellaneous matters. He said the affairs behind the young master of the Qi family turned out to be miscellaneous matters. Song Yin remembered the red lantern outside the mansion again and said, Big brother, when did he leave? This asked Qi Liang, who frowned and recalled, about half a month ago, I had military affairs at the time and hadn't returned home for a long time. When I returned, I had already left. According to my father, he died of illness. No wonder, in my impression, Big brother has always been in poor health. Song Yin's face changed. Well, in all these years, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine or Western medicine, medicine has never stopped. Although it always looks like a sickly medicine jar, it still has a lot of popularity, Qi Liang sighed. Seeing Qi Liang drinking more and more, Song Yin couldn't resist and instructed his servants to serve him well. He stood up and left on his own. It's late at night and the rain has stopped, but the damp chill has not yet dissipated. The maid carried a lamp and walked ahead to lead the way. Song Yin stepped on the bluestone road, looking absent-mindedly at the pitch black that could not be seen through the candlelight on the side. The eldest young master of the Qi family has died, and it is regrettable that there is not even a white lantern in the whole family. Even the red light of Aunt Zinaba has been hanging for so long, and it hasn't been replaced yet. The eldest son has only been missing for half a month. Although Qi Shihuan said that the white-haired person gave the black-haired person away, Song Yin did not see any sadness on that old face, not even a trace of sadness. Song Yin remembered the rumors he had heard in the Qi family when he was a child, saying that the eldest young master of the Qi family was not even the son of the Qi master. It's hard to say who the eldest son of the Qi family is, but that aunt had a big belly before entering the house. Song Yin shook her head, trying to shake off the absurd rumors in her mind. What he should be worried about now is that the suspected target character has died. Who should trigger this damn mission with? Ah! The maid leading the way exclaimed in surprise, and the lamp in her hand fell to the ground in fear. What's wrong? Song Yin regained his senses and picked up the lamp. The warm yellow light reflected his profile differently from a real person. The maid looked at the handsome young master who had just returned to the mansion, as if he had come out of a movie poster. Her heart, which was unusually frightened, returned to normal beating. Damn it, I'm startling young Master Biao. The maid leaned over and didn't dare to look up, carefully taking the lamp from Song Yin's hand. Let me take it. Song Yin didn't want to make things difficult for her either. He looked at her trembling hand and returned the lantern. What are you afraid of? At first, the maid hesitated and refused to speak, but her heart was still too afraid, so she had to speak out the voice she had just heard. Crying. Song Yin repeated, somewhat puzzled. The maid quickly nodded and said as she walked, there have been several incidents in the mansion recently. I have been serving in the courtyard here and have heard of them several times now. The maid paused for a moment, her eyes flickering with fear. Lian, who has a good relationship with me, used to serve in the backyard. One night, she, heard someone crying during the night watch. It's still intermittent, it's really scary. Chapter 6. Escape. You are listening at novel full.audio. Listening to the constant sucking sounds in the darkness, Qiehei was both angry and shy, and his ears turned red with anger. But he couldn't break free, his whole body was trapped in that ghost's arms, unable to move, and his chin was pinched by the ghost's hand, unable to shut his mouth at all. Jin Yanqing listened to the mournful sobs of Qiehei, and his heart, which was no longer beating, seemed to have the warmth of a living person again. He knew that only Qiehei could cross him. The feeling that the people under him brought to Jin Yanqing was too beautiful, and Jin Yanqing lost control and caressed his warm and soft body. Help, help, let me go. The cold touch made Qiehei shiver, and a decadent plea for mercy overflowed from his lips. Qiehei couldn't bear it anymore. This way of taking life was too difficult. Previously, those ghosts used the most brutal methods to tear up his body, but now they are using such unbearable methods to humiliate his psychological last line of defense. No matter what kind of dying experience it was, Qiehei couldn't bear it anymore. The damp and cold breath kept hitting Qiehei's fragile neck, and something like silk hung on his face. When it landed on his palm the next time, he instinctively tightened it, and it took him a long time to realize that it was a smooth strand of long hair. Unfortunately, he couldn't escape, like a stranded fish lacking water. Please, I can't cross you, can you let me go? Jin Yanqing gradually regained consciousness amidst Qiehei's murmurs. He stopped his movements and affectionately touched Qiehei's smooth forehead, with a soothing touch. The light came on, and Qiehei instinctively squinted his eyes. It wasn't until he adapted to the light that he could see the person in front of him clearly. It's you. Looking at his pitiful appearance, Jin Yanqing half knelt in front of him, his cold and pale hands lightly caressing Qiehei and the messy wet hair on his forehead. It's me. Qiehei was still afraid when he saw him, turned his head to avoid his hand, and shrank his neck, trembling non-stop. I haven't provoked you before, could you please spare me? Qiehei no longer looked at him, no matter how beautiful the person in front of him was, in his eyes they were all mischievous ghosts with painted skin. Even if they grew into immortals, he dared not look at them. Jin Yanqing didn't answer, just looked at him. Seeing him not answering, Qiehei boldly said, "What other wish do you still have? I will definitely help you. If it doesn't work, I'll burn incense and paper money for you day and night. I'll offer it to you every Chinese New Year and holiday. If it doesn't work, I'll find a Taoist for you and send you to a good family." Jin Yanqing lowered his eyes and took Qiehei's hand. "I'm different from them," he said, "I don't want anything, I just want you to die with me." Qiehei took a deep breath, what's so different about him? Qiehei, do you also want me to be bad? Jin Yanqing approached again, pressing against Qiehei's forehead. Qiehei was so scared that his eyelids trembled. "It's a long way to go. You should go get a good pregnancy. My medical report shows that I can still live for at least 50 more years. The longer you live, the more painful it becomes," said Jin Yanqing, with her lips hooked and her eyebrows and eyes filled with a soft and heartless bond. "Qiehei, I can't see you suffer." Qiehei was so scared that he pushed his predecessors without leaving a trace. "Is that right? That's really a pity. When I was young, others praised me for being able to endure hardship." Looking at Qiehei's haggard and weathered face, Jin Yanqing showed a helpless and nostalgic expression. "Next time I come to find you, come with me. Don't come looking for me." Before Qiehei could say anything, Jin Yanqing disappeared. Qiehei couldn't have really died as Jin Yanqing had said. He lay down in bed and began to collect all these things related to gods, ghosts, and ghosts online, constantly paying attention to collections. Collecting the morning light was faint on the horizon, and Qiehei, who had not slept all night, hurriedly ran out of the room and rushed into the landlord's small yard. "Uncle! Uncle! My family has an accident and I need to go back to my hometown. I won't rent the house anymore, and the deposit doesn't need to be refunded. I'll give you the key back. Uncle. Open the door. When Qiehei just shouted these 3 words, he felt his eyes turn black and he looked back nervously. Here it is. Uncle Chen walked into the yard with a pair of fluorescent powder crystal slippers, still holding soybean milk deep-fried dough sticks in his hand. Uncle Chen hadn't seen Qiehei for a long time, so he looked up and down and joked, "Young man, you have such heavy dark circles under your eyes. You went to be a thief tonight." "It's just that there's an accident at home and I'm worried about not sleeping well. I'll go back and take a look, but I won't come back afterwards. Please keep the key." Uncle Chen snorted at soybean milk. Uncle Chen shoved a small bag of deep-fried dough sticks into Qiehei's hand. Qiehei was too embarrassed to stop, so he blocked back. "I've eaten, Uncle Chen, I'm on my way, take your time." But Uncle Chen insisted on stuffing it into his hand, as the plastic bag was not sturdy and oil stains seeped out. Qiehei frowned, suppressed the greasiness in his palms, and forced a smile, saying, "Uncle Chen, I've eaten it before, I really can't eat it. A big and small guy, just eating so much, it's not enough." Chen Shuyin smiled sympathetically and his face was full of wrinkles. He stared at Qiehei and bit the oily deep-fried dough sticks in his hand. In Qiehei's eyes, Uncle Chen tore at the paper folding ingots in his hand, eating them with relish. "It's delicious, it's really delicious." Qiehei's gaze shifted from Uncle Chen's hand to his face, and his once waxy old face turned pale, with dark eyes and ink stains spreading. Chen Shu's casual paper figure appearance frightened Qiehei enough. Qiehei ignored Chen Shu's pleasantries and almost fled in despair. "At a young age, you are so timid." 10 minutes later, Qiehei dragged his luggage and entered the hurried crowd. He looked back nervously, feeling as if someone was staring at him from behind with a malicious gaze from the moment he left. No, right. He forced himself not to think too much. He hasn't slept well these days, and now he always has a feeling of being top-heavy and foot-light. It wasn't until he got into that second-hand Xiaoli that he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Along the way, he was in a state of fear, driving at a speed not as fast as passing electric cars. From time to time, he looked at the empty rear seat, afraid that something might come out. Qiehei followed the navigation to the hotel he had booked overnight, but at first he didn't realize anything. But as he drove out of the familiar environment, the bustling streets gradually began to open up, until no one could be seen, and Qiehei did not reach the designated location. Damn it! Qiehei slammed the steering wheel hard, couldn't help but press the accelerator, but then spun around for another half hour. You have deviated from the route and are currently replanning your route. When the mechanical prompt sounded, Qiehei's heart became even more anxious. And the leakage of the house happens to be accompanied by continuous night rain, and with the drizzle, there is also a grey mist. The eerie weather made Qiehei's heart, which he had originally wanted to hang in suspense, completely hang. Grass, can't we hide? What's the point? There's a head of injustice and a head of debt, why did they all come to me? Qiehei wanted to cry without tears. He had a pure and virtuous life, and the worst thing he ever did was to throw tomatoes on people's heads during the landlord fight. Knock, knock. Amidst the noisy sound of rain, there were a few crisp knocking sounds on the window. Even in the slightest, Qiehei, like a startled bird, was able to capture them smoothly. At this moment, Qiehei was both angry and timid, wanting to curse loudly, but he didn't have the courage to turn his head to look at the car window, with 10 fingers tightly gripping the steering wheel. Da-da-da. The rain gradually grew heavier, and the dark and heavy rain curtain covered the blurred figure swaying under the dim yellow street lamp. The dense pouring rain continuously washed against the windshield, and the wipers were feeling overwhelmed. Qiehei thought with his toes, knowing that it must not be something clean. Qiehei gathered his energy and stared intently at the road ahead. The pouring rain, dim yellow street lights, twisted figures under the street lights that turned black and white one after another. He bit the tip of his tongue hard, and tears welled up in pain. It wasn't an illusion, it was the third time he had seen this dirty thing. The first time that thing seemed to be crouching or lying on the ground, like weeds coiled around the roots of an old tree, not very conspicuous. The second time he could already see its figure, hunched down like an elderly person with a hunched back. The third time, this unknown ghost thing moved, and its limbs seemed wild and just tamed, causing psychological discomfort. He tried hard to bite his tongue and force himself to ignore his physical and psychological discomfort, and continued to drive forward. Finally, after several hours of ghosting on the provincial road, he finally saw a fork in the road. He almost burst into tears of joy as he turned the steering wheel to the right, but suddenly the twisted figure rushed out of his sight and collided directly with his windshield. Scarlet eyes, with a mouth full of tiny flesh and blood, terrifying yet real. Ah! He was so scared that he instinctively screamed and closed his eyes, firmly pressing the brake. The sharp braking sound tore through the tangled rain curtain. Qiehei's body, which had been washed out of the car seat by inertia, was forcefully pulled back by the seatbelt, and a startling bruise formed on his neck and shoulders, which were not covered by clothes. The imagined violent collision did not strike, and Qiehei boldly opened his eyes. The distance between the front of the car and the guardrail is only a few tens of centimeters, and outside the guardrail is a steep mountain road. If it falls, he can directly look for something to clear. I almost passed away at the age of 22, Qiehei rubbed the bruises on his neck and shoulders, his soul still uncertain. Pop! A hand without palm lines, as thin as a stick, struck heavily above the windshield. Qiehei's body stiffened and he unconsciously held his breath. His amber eyes trembled up and down, slowly looking up. Chapter 7. Soul Startling on a Rainy Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Trembling back to the room, Song Yi now added a bunch of gods and ghosts and finally fell asleep. Qi Yun. Song Yi heard someone calling out to him in a daze while sleeping. Tired, he struggled to open his eyes. Who? After eating this bowl of noodles, let's go back to the house and do our homework, right? Song Yi only then realized that there was a bowl of hot soup noodles in front of him. The crystal clear and emerald green chopped scallions, combined with 1 or 2 drops of fragrant sesame oil, make this bowl of noodles so appetizing. Song Yi felt his body was out of control, and he couldn't help but start wolfing down. Through the lingering heat, he couldn't see the woman across from him clearly, only feeling that she was very sad. He wanted to take a closer look, but the delicate and gentle woman in front of him suddenly said, "Uncle." Song Yi couldn't believe it and widened his eyes. Who was that person just now? A hint of impatience flashed in the man's eyes. So what about you? Where's your mother? Song Yin's hand holding the chopsticks trembled slightly. He looked through his uncle's eyes and found that the person inside was not himself, but a child with an indistinct face. This incredible scene made his hair stand on end. I don't know. Be good. The man's generous and warm palm caressed the boy's head, and his voice suddenly softened. Dad knows that your mother can't bear to part with you. She must have told you where she's going. This child's body seems to have become accustomed to being afraid of being strict with his father, and in the face of his father's transformation, this body is somewhat flattered. But he doesn't know where his so-called mother went, he just subconsciously says he doesn't know. Father's hands were still warm, but his gaze had already changed its flavor, so fierce that it shouldn't be the way he looked at his child. The father gently pinched the boy's face and patiently coaxed, "Tell Dad, I'll take your mother with you to the newly opened department store tomorrow. Didn't you keep clamoring to go?" The child's eyes lit up. Although he was afraid of his father, he subconsciously hoped that his father could love him. Why, it's not enough. Tomorrow, I'll have someone customize a 3-layer foreign cake for you and give you a piano as a gift. How about that? Okay. Although the boy doesn't know where his mother is, he wants everyone to go out and play together tomorrow on his birthday, and he doesn't want his mother to be away. So the boy answered every question his father asked very carefully. Later, the father mercilessly threw his frail mother onto the cold and hard floor. The boy looked at the blue and purple on his mother's elbows and knees and seemed to understand something. In an instant, something shattered, like a shattered mirror that fell to the ground and could never return. He widened his eyes and saw the so-called birthday gift that his father casually threw at his feet, as if it had been nailed to the ground and could not move. Still running. How foolish are you to have the confidence that I won't find you? You better kill me. Otherwise, if I can run the first time, there will be a second time. As she spoke, her mother suddenly got up and ran frantically towards the door. Father was very tall, and one hand blocked his mother's way. He angrily pulled off his tie and said to the servant behind him, "Butler, lock the door." Everything happened too suddenly, and the boy who was still waiting for his family to play happily was scared to death. He seemed to know what big mistake he had made. He might have blocked his mother's only way out. Bad guy. Let go of her. Mom doesn't want to be here. Let her go. The boy pounced and bit his father's hand hard. The father slapped the boy in the face with a backhand, making his eyes turn black and unable to stand. When the mother saw her son being beaten, she scratched and scratched at him, vowing to protect him to the death. But she is too weak. In front of the fierce eagle, harmless rabbits cannot protect her cubs. The father pushed her aside and saw the boy still getting up and biting him, so he directly threw the child's head to the ground. If it weren't for the creamy cake that fell to the ground, the cold floor might have splashed with warm blood from the child. Then he transformed into a man dressed in splendid attire, calm and confident. Chapter 8. Ghostly Sun Eyes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ah. Xian let out a scream, paused, and quickly withdrew his hand. The sharp golden needle was able to pierce through the skin of Qiehei's throat, leaving only tiny blood droplets oozing out. He glared angrily at Qiehei with crimson eyes. Although Qiehei had a listless expression, he smiled at the corners of his mouth and playfully shook the spring in his hand. I actually got it, he said. Xian kicked over, grabbed Qiehei's hair and threw him to the ground, then stomped hard on Qiehei's wrist. Ah! Qiehei felt pain and couldn't hold it, so he could only release the knife. Xian kicked the knife away again and said, "You can't even catch a wilted carrot." Xian covered his almost cut palm and shouted at the crowd, "A bunch of useless things, go back and prepare to wash the lying board clean. We held it down, but, this kid broke his arm and wants to break free. We didn't expect." The voice of the people under their hands is getting quieter and their confidence is getting weaker. It seems that in order to prove themselves, the four big men each held Qiehei tightly, making him unable to move and able to lift his eyelids. Qiehei's face was slammed to the ground with a heavy thud, making a dull sound, like a small stone being thrown into the heart of a turbulent lake. Qiehei tightly closed his lips, afraid of any dirt splashing into his mouth. He opened his eyes and just looked at the man not far away. There's someone there. Fool. Just seeing him now means he's definitely not a person. Boss, the boss called and said there's something very dangerous near us. This kid won't move for now, let the boss go back for treatment first. The boss said, no matter how late it is, I can't even save your life. The master also said, ah. Xian slapped his subordinates with a loud slap, wishing to scrape a layer of flesh off the messenger's body. The subordinate on the side was trembling with fear and said, Boss, this is what the boss means. Got it. Xian was furious and wanted to make up for it, but he still had lingering palpitations and thought about it. He gritted his teeth and led a group of black-clad men away, leaving Qi and a person in the middle of the road, leaving him to fend for himself. Gradually, Qiehei lay there for an unknown amount of time, only knowing that the rain had stopped. The man stood in front of him, his deep black eyes staring at Qiehei, filled with an irresistible murderous aura. "It's not him." Qiehei silently turned over, disregarding the soreness and pain all over his body, and turned his back to Jianyanqing. He made such an inexplicable conclusion for some reason, as if he had become too familiar with Jianyanqing. But he just didn't know, or rather didn't dare to break that layer of cognition. Like when he was a child, he didn't dare to look into the dark windows of an empty house, afraid of peeking into unfamiliar things that were about to move in the dark. "Little Pity, wake up." Jianyanqing squinted her beautiful eyes and smiled at him, half embracing him. Qiehei couldn't even respond, his throat could only make a hee sound, like a dying fish that had been stranded for too long and had long lost its strength. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't shake off those cold and broad hands. Hiss. Jianyanqing let out a low cry, and his face was slashed with blood by Qiehei's struggling and disorganized hand. A shallow bloodstain seeped out of his pale face, making him appear to be a cannibalistic demon. Looking at Qiehei's hand that had not yet been retracted, he slowly wiped away the blood stains on his cheeks, and his gaze fell on his crimson fingertips, feeling somewhat confused. Despite Qiehei's struggle, the man loosened his collar and threw him hard to the ground, kicking him in the chest. Qiehei, who was covered in bruises, couldn't withstand such a kick. He could only gasp for breath, like a decaying old bellows. Qiehei lowered his head, weakly curled up in the mud, like a corpse floating in the pool of hell that night. Cough, cough, cough. There seemed to be a fire burning in his throat, making him unable to breathe and feeling his lungs burning. He had no expression on his face, but his tone was quite affectionate. "Little Pity," he said. Qiehei frowned in extreme disgust, turned his head to avoid his hand, gritted his teeth, and desperately crawled backwards. Alas! Jianyanqing sighed helplessly and grabbed his messy hair. "What are you running for? I just saved you. Are you willing to come with me this time?" Due to intense pain, Qiehei had to tilt his head back, revealing his face covered in blood stains, and met his dark and deep eyes. "Qiehei, I love you. Come with me. What lies before you and me is never a gap between good and evil, life and death. Crazy. Evil ghost." Qiehei's stubborn eyes showed a strange color, which was a look at dirty things, feeling dirty because of disgust. Jianyanqing listened to the long-lost insults and laughed instead of angry, with a suppressed excitement. His subordinates couldn't control their strength, causing Qiehei to moan in pain. Jianyanqing never heard Qiehei's plea for mercy from beginning to end, so this painful moan had an inexplicable coquettishness in his ears. In fact, he also couldn't bear to let Qiehei suffer, but there was nothing he could do. Qiehei, whom he had seen before, was always like an immature wolf cub. When he loosened his grip, he would fiercely bite into his throat, constantly tearing off a piece of flesh with blood. But looking at Qiehei, who was disheveled and lifeless, Jianyanqing seemed to have softened his heart. As usual, he had been bitten so many times, but it was only his willingness. He let go of his hand, and Qiehei's head was unsupported, soft and hanging in his cold palm. Jianyanqing tenderly rubbed the bruises at the end of his eyes with his fingertips and lowered his voice. "What are you afraid of?" That voice was like a venomous snake that had tempted Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, tempting those who listened to it to express their dirty desires that were hidden in the depths of their hearts. Qiehei looked up at the man with some effort, his disgusted gaze unchanged. He turned his head and bit the man's finger hard, tasting the familiar sweet and fishy taste. Jianyanqing seemed to feel no pain and suppressed her heavy breathing. "Tell me, what are you afraid of me?" Qiehei glanced at him, feeling powerless to bite off his finger, and spat out a mouthful of blood. Jianyanqing stubbornly pressed his injured finger on Qiehei's broken and cracked lips, with an indescribable madness in his eyes. "Poor little one, you can't be afraid of me. That's my love for you." Qiehei endured the pain on his lips and gritted his teeth, saying, "You scammer. He he he. Jean Yanqing chuckled low, lifted Qiehei's face, and dropped a devout kiss on his forehead, as light as a feather. Poor little one, thank you for the compliment. He attached himself to Qiehei's ear, his lazy and deep voice resembling a demon's whisper, you taught me these things. Qiehei's body stiffened, as if he was in the midst of the icy winter and snow of the 12th lunar month. His memory passed through the confusing past and saw a face that did not belong to him. But he looks exactly the same as him. But now Qiehei, who was mentally exhausted, had no energy to think. When Jean Yanqing lowered his head and kissed him quickly, Qiehei gritted his teeth and lifted his arm with all his might, fiercely placing it on Jean Yanqing's face with a crisp sound. Jean Yanqing smiled and said, do you want to touch me or push me away? Qiehei let out a low smile and fearlessly looked at the enchanting eyes of Jean Yanqing, as his eyes showed panic due to his actions. Qiehei pulled a layer of skin off Jean Yanqing's face as soon as he pulled it off. Ghosts like to talk nonsense while wearing human skin. My dad taught me to talk to people who are obsessed with ghosts' eyes. Let's first take a look at how many faces they have. Under the human skin mask was a face that was even more stunning than Jean Yanqing, because she was a woman, and Jean Yanqing was not as beautiful as her. I guessed it right, Qiehei smiled heartily. Oh, you actually saw through it. Is it difficult? Do you still remember him this time? The woman was very beautiful, but with a smile, she was very evil. Who should I remember? Qiehei asked a question from the depths of his soul. The woman smiled and covered her face with her sleeve. Of course, he is the original owner of this face. You should know, 9 out of 10 times you have died in his hands. Qiehei was frightened by her half-smile and said, why do you all like to be riddles? You make me half dead and then run away. It's okay if you run away and say things I don't understand. The woman smiled but remained silent, extending her slender finger to point to the sky. It's getting late, it's time to take you on the road. The woman's blue and white arms suddenly turned pitch black, as if her red nails were eating children's clothes and piercing straight into Qiehei's neck. Qiehei's overloaded body and brain have not yet had a chance to make an emergency response. I saw the woman's expression change and she quickly turned sideways, like a lively swallowtail fish. Zheng. The cold knife, with a piercing sound of breaking wind, slanted into the cement ground beside Qiehei's ear, emitting a cold light and making a clanging sound. Qi and Wang looked at the person in front of him, unable to believe that the person in front of him was the real Jean Yanqing. The woman dodged to a relatively safe position, separated by a safe distance, and said, I can't believe you managed to earn it yourself. Ha ha ha, it seems that the nails are not thick enough. Next time, I will ram you and your coffin into the soil, and you will never be able to be reborn. Jean Yanqing clearly met a woman and had an unresolved hatred. Then you can just think about it. Left and right are just these tactics. Jean Yanqing walked up to Qiehei, lifted him up, clasped him in his arms, and fully protected him. Qiehei smelled the strong bloody smell on Jean Yanqing's body, accompanied by a damp and chilly aura. There were several damages on his clothes, and a dark red liquid was still seeping out. Qiehei twisted a little on his fingertips, it was blood. Qiehei looked down, and the wide sleeves and robes of Jean Yanqing were also dripping blood, forming a small depression at his feet. It seems that Jean Yanqing was seriously injured. Next time, it's better to die in my hands and avoid suffering some shameless sins. I've figured it out, short-lived ghost. After leaving the last mockery on Qiehei, she turned into a wisp of smoke and gradually dissipated under the sunshine. Qiehei finally couldn't hold on anymore, his forehead pressed against his hard chest, slowly closing his eyes. His mind was filled with thoughts that I wanted to live 100 years, as my father had said. Qiehei. Qiehei. A familiar call came in my ear, as if I had heard it thousands or even hundreds of times. It was the true voice of Jean Yanqing. Strange, I have only seen him twice, yet I am so familiar with his voice. Is it really just familiar with sound? Chapter 9. Reception. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Song Yin pinched his sleeve and thought for a while. Since he was the target person, he would meet alone sooner or later. After much thought, he boldly pushed open the door, and the thick darkness had already melted away. The solitary moon outside is bright, without a cluster of dark clouds by its side, and the sky is faintly covered with fish belly white. Under the moonlight, the deserted corridor was unobstructed, with nothing but mottled flower shadows. In late autumn, the dew was heavy, and Song Yin's clothes were quickly soaked in cold sweat. He stared at the flower's shadow without moving. At this moment, 10,000 grass and mud horses galloped past his mind, not to mention flowers. There was not even a pot of grass in front of his door. What kind of ghost is the flower's shadow he sees? Sorry, it's gone. Song Yin turned around and was about to leave. Suddenly, a chill enveloped Song Yin's face with a strange floral fragrance. A faint gaze passed through the wind and landed on him. Song Yin felt the unfamiliar, dangerous, and heart-pounding look in his eyes. In an instant, he seemed to be bewitched and raised his head numbly. At this moment, the sky was gradually brightening, and a pair of clear and profound eyes met Song Yin's 4 eyes. Those eyes were hidden in the intense dawn, shining like a world wrapped in silver, shining brightly and cold and mysterious. Song Yin felt his heart beating like a sudden flame, warm and straightforward, yet suppressing it. Through the misty water after the rain, people not far away only need one glance to feel like 1,000 years. What a beautiful ghost! Song Yin was stared at by the ghost and almost lost his soul. Song Yin. The ghost whispered his name, then covered his mouth and coughed weakly. Song Yin watched as the person trembled lightly, with a somewhat transparent body, as if he had been separated from the world. That person didn't need to do anything, just standing there. Song Yin felt that her gaze couldn't be moved away. Slowly, Song Yin's legs, which were originally like pouring lead, now began to move on their own, in the direction of Qian. Qian watched quietly, his clear black eyes reflecting Song Yin's embarrassed and fearful expression. Ding, the detection target's blackening value has changed, and the current blackening value is 100. Hush. Song Yin was so scared that he bit his tongue hard before regaining control of his body. When people are tempted, they want to urinate, and Song Yin turns his head and runs away. Song Yin, who had regained consciousness from the pain, took a deep breath and quickly turned around to tightly close the door. It seems that this original body is not a good thing either. When the young master of the Qi family saw him, his blackening value was directly full. Good guy, daring oneself is the last straw to crush the camel. Is it better to have a forced login at the beginning of this chaotic day, or is it better to have a forced login? On the other side, watching him stumble and run away in panic, Qi Yun's cold expression did not loosen at all. But in his eyes, he indulged in indulging in meaningless dying struggles for his beloved prey. Song Yin stumbled and collapsed onto the bed, looking from a distance as if she had lost her soul. The flickering orange candlelight was reflected in Song Yin's eyes, and he looked as if he had been tormented. System, I'm seeing a ghost, he said. System. Deducting 1 point, the balance is 0.2. Dear, I'm in trouble too, woo-woo. After staring at the flames for a long time, Song Yin blurted out, that ghost is Qi Yun. He actually attacked his younger brother. You just saw it, didn't you? He doesn't know what kind of illusion he used on me. I can only stare at him dumbfounded and walk towards him. System. Dear, the data here shows that there were no supernatural fluctuations just now. Song Yin jumped up in disbelief. Then how could I be like an evil, with my heart pounding and my body stiff and unable to move? Chapter 10. Meeting again. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. System. Kiss, I have read countless people here, and there is also a possibility called love at first sight. Song Yin felt like he was almost choked to death by saliva. It's impossible, absolutely impossible. Although I'm good at it. At least. In any case, I shouldn't. By the way, he's really good. Looking. The symptoms of palpitations and shortness of breath in this situation persisted for several days, and Song Yin felt that if it continued like this, he would go crazy. I can't bear to read it at all. Song Yin closed his book and rubbed his brow wearily. Not only can't he continue reading books, but he can't even complete tasks now. Lying on the sofa, he stared blankly at the auspicious cloud pattern on the beam, but couldn't help but think of that night in his mind. Thinking of Qian's naturally affectionate eyes, the autumn water is nothing more than this. Look, why do you remember again? Later, you should be so scared that you can't sleep anymore. Song Yin hugged his head bitterly. Knock, knock. The knocking on the door outside interrupted Song Yin's wild thoughts just in time. Song Yin pushed the book in front of the table and said, "Come in." After waiting for a while, no one pushed the door in. The knocking on the door continued, with a rhythmic sound of 1 or 2 beats. He thought it should be the little maid Xian from that day. These days, he claimed to be sick and refused to leave the house. It was the well-behaved child who brought him meals. But Xian is a lively child, even the knocking on the door is light and cheerful, unlike this time, which is low and oppressive. Not to mention getting up and opening the door, Song Yin was as scared as a frightened rabbit. The divine power from somewhere lifted the cabinet and blocked the door. He kicked off his shoes in a daze, turned his head and plunged into the bed, hugging the silk quilt in his arms. At this moment, the system was also trembling with fear, tightly embracing its own string of code. But soon the sound of Xian outside the door dispelled his panic. "Young master, it's me." The master saw that young Master Biao hadn't come out to eat for a few days and ordered me to bring it to him tonight. "I told you not to have dinner, and you don't have to go this far." Song Yin finally took a breath. This is what the master ordered. I have no choice but to deliver it to Master Biao. Song Yin still dared not relax his guard. "Then you leave it outside, I'll take it later. Let me bring it over to the young master. These are all the freshest, but if they're cold, they won't taste good." Xianguo's voice sounded cold from a very close place, and Song Yin's heart suddenly missed a beat. He instinctively looked for it, and as he was bowing his head, he collided head-on with the bloody head protruding from under the bed. Ah, 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 ah. System. Ah, 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 ah. Song Yin has never been so agile before. A kite flipped over and fell off the bed. Even though he stumbled a few steps, Song Yin was still as agile as a human. He struggled to open the window with all his might, kicked his legs, and exerted force on his waist before flipping over. Song Yin shook off the blanket and continued to sprint for 100 meters until he realized something was wrong in the area. But this time, he didn't see that charming person at a glance. The deeper you go, the darker the light becomes. Song Yin stepped on his own shadow and arrived at a decadent and desolate courtyard. I can't believe that this picturesque Qi mansion still has such a dilapidated courtyard. The scene of the backyard is quite different from the original memory. The familiar carved beams and painted rafters has disappeared, but instead is covered with weeds. In just a few short years, things have changed and people have changed. It turns out that for so many years, Qi Yun, the so-called young master of the Qi family, has always lived in this place.